Chapter 9. Redefining Worth. There's a particular kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable. Not the silence of two people content on a couch, not the pause between songs on the radio. The silence that comes when someone who is supposed to speak can't or chooses not to, and the world has to decide what to do with that. After the surgery, I started to notice how much of our idea of worth is wrapped around noise. Loud voices lead meetings, loud opinions fill panels, loud outrage dominates feeds. We give the microphone, literally and metaphorically, to the ones who can fill space fastest, the talkers, the interrupters, the people who don't hesitate before jumping in. I'd never been one of them, even before my larynx was taken. Stuttering and seizures had put me at the edge of conversations long before the cancer did. Now, with a stoma and a notebook instead of a larynx, I found myself watching more closely than ever how the world arranged itself around volume. In waiting rooms, the loudest patients got seen first, not because of triage, but because they complained, demanded, took up sonic real estate. In group settings, the people who spoke most were assumed to know most. Ideas delivered quickly, even half-formed, were praised over ideas scribbled carefully on a page 10 minutes later. At the coffee shop, the barista remembered the orders of the chatty regulars before mine, even if I came every day. My nod and held-up fingers, 2 sugars, thanks, made less of an imprint than a spiel about someone's weekend. It's not malicious most of the time, just how our brains work. We equate noise with presence, ease with competence, fluency with intelligence. If you've never had your tongue rebel or your throat removed, it's easy to believe those things are the same as worth. I had believed it too, even as I fought against it. Years of being measured against how quickly I could answer, how clearly I could present, had carved that metric into me. Now, stripped of even the option to try, I had to face the raw question underneath. If I can't be loud, am I still allowed to matter? It wasn't an abstract, philosophical question. It smacked me in the face in everyday interactions. There was the woman at the bank. I went in to sort out some paperwork, new ID photo, updated contact details. When my number flashed on the screen, I went to the counter, whiteboard ready. The teller, a woman around my age, smiled mechanically. "How can I help you today?" she asked. I lifted the board. Lost voice. Can't talk. Need to update details. Is that okay? I'd written. Her smile faltered. "Oh," she said, thrown. "Oh, sure." She read the rest, nodding. But then, every time she had a question, she'd look past me to the person behind, in this case, my dad. "Does he have another form of ID?" she asked him. "Is he still at the same address? Does he have online banking?" Each time, Dad glanced at me, eyebrows raised. I wrote the answer. Yes, no, yes. Handed the board to him. He read it out loud. Yes, no, yes, he parroted. She typed, satisfied. I watched the exchange like a weird game of telephone. 2 adults, 1 silent, 1 voicing. The system automatically defaulting to the mouth that made the most noise, even when the words weren't his. I left with my paperwork done and a familiar sourness in my chest. "Outside," Dad said. "She meant well." I nodded. She probably did. But meaning well doesn't change the structure. It doesn't change who gets looked at when a voice is needed. If your worth is measured in decibels, people will keep turning toward the loudest source, even when it's just echoing someone else. The same pattern played out elsewhere. At a family barbecue, one of my cousins, well-meaning, half-cut, said, "Must be peaceful, eh? Not having to talk to anyone." I raised an eyebrow. Peaceful? That's not what it felt like when I fumbled for my marker while the conversation sprinted on without me. "What does he do then?" another cousin asked, not unkindly, nodding at me like I wasn't there. It stung in the old way. I picked up my board. "Listen," I wrote, "and clean my own neck hole. Hobbies." They laughed, half embarrassed. Humor became one of my tools, a way to undercut pity without having to raise my non-existent voice. But the question lingered. What do you do in a world that tells you to speak up if you want to be seen, when your throat has been carved out? What is being heard when your words travel by marker or keystroke instead of air? For a while, I tried to keep up with the old metrics. In group settings, I'd push myself to write more, to force my contributions into the space before it moved on. The effort was exhausting. By the time I'd put together a sentence, the subject had shifted. A joke had landed, someone had cut someone else off. My carefully composed thought arrived like a letter to the wrong address. I'd hold up the board, read it in their faces. Polite patience. Mild discomfort. That anxious flicker. Do we go back now? Is it rude if we don't? Is it patronizing if we do? Sometimes the moment could be bent back. Often it couldn't. Every time I felt the old shame rise. Too slow, too late, too quiet. After one such night, I came home, slumped at the table, and stared at the pen in my hand. "You can't win their game," the internal voice said, not unkindly, "so stop playing by their rules." Their rules: volume, speed, interruption. Being the one under the bright light, with the microphone, with the floor. What if I stopped chasing that? What if I'd never really wanted it, beyond the urge to prove I could? It felt dangerous to even think it. We're trained to aim for the center, to want the stage, to believe that being at the edge is failure. But the margins had been my territory long before the surgery. Back of the classroom, scribbling jokes in my head while others shouted out answers. Side of the party, nursing a drink, catching bits of conversations, but rarely the whole thing. Now, with a neck scar and a notebook, the margin wasn't just social, it was embodied. People's eyes slid past the stoma, then came back. Some turned away, some leaned in. In that space, neither fully included nor fully excluded, I started to see a different kind of worth. It wasn't performative, it wasn't loud, it was in the way you paid attention. I saw it in the old bloke at the head and neck support group. He'd lost part of his tongue to cancer. His speech was thick, hard to catch. Every word cost him effort. When new members came in, eyes wide, bodies stiff, he'd shuffle over, sit beside them, and just be there. No speeches, no pep talks, just a hand on a shoulder, a slow nod. In those small gestures, he communicated more comfort than any well-meaning relative with nervous chatter. Presence, that was his currency. I watched him and thought, that's a kind of leadership that doesn't need a mic. I saw it in the nurse who always sat down before talking to me, putting herself at eye level instead of looming over the bed, firing off questions. Taking the extra second communicated, your time isn't an inconvenience. I'm not in such a rush that I can't meet you where you are. It cost her nothing. It gave me everything. Worth, I began to realize, wasn't in how loudly you could announce yourself. It was in how you moved around other people's fragility, how you occupied your space without flattening theirs. Losing my voice made me hyper-aware of who did that and who didn't. In the wider world, the pressure to be loud didn't ease. If anything, it intensified from a distance. Workplaces sent emails about thought leadership and finding your voice in your industry. Campaigns urged people to speak their truth, as if writing it down or living it quietly didn't count. Social media rewarded hot takes and constant commentary. Silence, in that economy, was suspect, a sign you were disengaged, apathetic, complicit. I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through feeds, and felt the familiar prickling inadequacy. You can't raise your voice. You can't even have a voice. Does that make your anger about injustice less valid? Your grief less real? Your care for your friends less useful? In my head, the answer was obvious. Worth is not a decibel level. But out there, people kept equating the two. If you're not speaking up, you're part of the problem. What about those of us who have been trying to speak up our whole lives and met only impatience, interruption, or, now, physiological impossibility? Where do we fit in the narrative of empowerment? Number billboard were made for us. No slogan read, "Some of the bravest people you'll ever meet can't shout. Pay attention anyway." I started, slowly, to shift my own narrative. Not from "I am voiceless," that old dramatic cliché, but from "I am quiet, therefore less," to "I am quiet, therefore I see things you might miss." That wasn't a consolation prize, it was a fact. In the space where my voice had been, I noticed more. The teenager on the tram flinching every time someone's phone dinged. The cashier whose shoulders sagged imperceptibly when a customer snapped at her. The friend who kept cracking jokes fractionally too loudly after his dad died, his grief leaking out at the edges. I couldn't interrupt the moment with a speech, but I could send a message later. "Saw you today. How are you holding up? Really?" I could sit next to the kid on the tram and not add to the noise. I could meet the cashier's eyes, hold them for a second, and scrawl on my card, "Thank you," underlining it once. Tiny actions. In the old metrics, they didn't count for much. They don't show up on a CV. They don't go viral. But they're the bricks that actually hold up a day. Those of us on the margins know this. We've built lives out here with nothing but small efforts. We watch the main stage, sure. We see the loud ones. Some are worth listening to. Many aren't. We also see the quiet exchanges in the wings. A teacher taking 5 extra minutes with the kid who can't get the words out. A stranger stepping in between a drunk guy and the person he's bothering. An overworked doctor pausing at the door, turning back to say, "Any more questions?" and meaning it. Worth, I realized, was not in how many people heard you at once. It was in whether the person in front of you felt less alone because you were there. If I could do that without a voice, through presence, through written words, through a hand on a shoulder, then maybe I hadn't been stripped of value after all. That sounds neat now. At the time, it was anything but. There were days when I felt like a ghost at my own life. At a friend's wedding, the MC made a joke about giving everyone a chance to say a few words, and the room laughed. Microphone passed from hand to hand. Speeches, tears, stories. I sat at my table, clapping when appropriate, heart heavy. On the whiteboard in my bag, I'd prepared a sentence hours earlier. "Happy for you, proud of you, wish you too every good thing." I never gave it to them, not because it wasn't true, but because the moment never came that felt right. I went home furious with myself. You had something to say, and you didn't say it. Again. Voice or no voice, you're still fading at the edges. The internal critic had a field day. Then, a week later, the groom texted, "Hey, been thinking about you. Saw you in the crowd during the speeches. You looked steady, like you were holding the room. Sounds weird, I know. Just felt better knowing you were there, even though you didn't say anything." I read it twice. Holding the room. I hadn't done anything but sit, watch, catch people's eyes when emotions got too high. Apparently, that was noticed. Apparently, presence alone can be an anchor. No words required. Maybe that sounds small. Compared to making a best man speech that goes down in family lore, it is. But if I'd spent my life learning anything, it was that small does not mean worthless. Stuttering had taught me the value of a single, hard-won hello. Epilepsy had taught me that showing up to a day, even when your brain had tried to floor you the night before, mattered. Cancer and surgery had taught me that staying alive, literally breathing, was not a given. Now, silence was teaching me that worth could be measured in subtler units, in patience, in attention, in the choice not to look away from someone else's pain because you didn't know what to say. There's a tendency, in these kinds of stories, to turn the person who loses something into a saint. He lost his voice and discovered the true beauty of silence. He rose above it all. That's not what happened. I was still petty sometimes, envious, angry. I'd watch someone hijack a meeting with a 15-minute monologue and think, give me 5 of your sentences. I could do something with them. I'd sit through arguments where whoever shouted loudest won and feel a bitter, familiar helplessness. But alongside that, slowly, another layer grew. Dignity. Not the stiff-backed, chin-up performance of dignity people demand from the sick and disabled when we're in public. A quieter thing. Dignity in choosing not to apologize every time I needed someone to wait while I wrote. Dignity in refusing to laugh along when people made jokes about mute buttons and finally getting some peace and quiet at home. Dignity in not shrinking my written words to match the space people thought I should take up. If I had something to say, I wrote the whole sentence, not just the minimum. In doctors' offices, when they talked over my head, I tapped the board sharply. Write it down, I'd insist. I'll read it. Don't dumb it down. I'm not thick. The first time I did that, the registrar blinked, surprised. Then her face shifted, something like respect. Of course, she said. Sorry, she adjusted. I'd spent years matching myself to other people's patience. Now, with less voice but more clarity, I started expecting them to meet me halfway. Not everyone did. Those who couldn't be bothered to wait, to read, to navigate the slight awkwardness of a new communication style drifted from my orbit. It hurt, but it also cleaned house. The ones who stayed, who leaned into the discomfort, who held the silence with me, that small circle, made me feel more real than any crowd applause ever could have. Worth, I began to understand, wasn't something you earned by being impressive enough. It was a given. The question wasn't, do I deserve to be here? It was, how do I live like I know I do, even when the world forgets? In the margins, you see all the ways people are quietly extraordinary without recognition. The carer on the night shift, changing sheets at 3 a.m. for the 3rd time because someone's body betrayed them. The person with chronic pain turning up to work, gritting their teeth, doing a full day, and going home to collapse where no one sees. The migrant whose English is halting but whose eyes are sharp, whose contributions are dismissed because they don't come out smoothly. They're not on stage. They're not trending. Their worth doesn't get measured in likes, in volume, in professional charisma. It shows up in persistence, in the refusal to disappear, in the small, stubborn insistence. I am here, even if you don't know how to listen to me. Losing my voice didn't make me noble. It did strip away one of the last illusions I'd been holding on to. That if I could just get my speech good enough, I'd finally arrive at real value. Standing at the sink one night, cleaning around the stoma with practiced care, I caught my reflection and, unexpectedly, felt something like affection. This scarred, quiet man had walked into endless rooms designed for different bodies, different tongues, and refused, over and over, to mistake other people's discomfort for his own unworthiness. He had done the humiliating work of asking for clarity instead of nodding along. He had written down what he couldn't say, even when his hand shook. He had kept existing in a world that measures life by output, productivity, chatter. That, I realized, was its own soft rebellion. Not a banner wave, not a speech, just staying. Refusing to internalize the message that quiet equals less. Refusing to make his life smaller to accommodate other people's fear of silence. My worth did not increase when I managed a joke on the whiteboard that made someone laugh. It did not decrease when I was too tired to write more than yes, no. It sat there, steady, regardless of volume. I had been loud in my head my whole life. Now I understood that this constant, messy, opinionated internal echo was proof enough that I was not empty. The rest was translation. Some days that translation made it to the page. Some days it made it to a hand on a shoulder. Some days it just stayed inside, a quiet knowing. The world around me still rewarded the ones who could shout. I couldn't change that. But in the small circle of my life, I could live as if another metric mattered more. Attention, kindness, presence. The courage to occupy the margins without apologizing for not being center stage. I won't pretend I never miss the fantasy of standing up in a room, clearing a throat I no longer have, and speaking smoothly, loudly, confidently. I do, but when that ache rises now, I picture instead the moments that have actually held me together. A nurse sitting in comfortable silence. A friend waiting while I finish my sentence without looking at their watch. My own hand, steady on the page, writing the story you're hearing now. If worth were measured by volume, those moments would be invisible. Measured by what they've saved in me, they are everything.